this past weekend was Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame induction weekend up in Cooperstown, where Major League Baseball just inducts new members into the Hall of Fame. We did have some former Phillies, Billy Wagner, I don't acknowledge that dude, and then you also had Dick Allen, as well as Ichiro and CC Sabathia. Real quick, let me just say that the fact that Ichiro had to wait a year is an absolute joke, and I could not love his Hall of Fame speech more. The fact that he took a shot at that idiot writer who should have his vote revoked, love it, because he's right. Like, when you factor in his Japanese stats and his American stats, the dude's the all-time hit king. Like, we forget that. He came over, I think, at the age of 28 or 29. To act like Ichiro wouldn't have broke Pete Rose's record if he had just started in Major League Baseball is ridiculous. That dude is a specimen. And he's one of those players that I'm sad my child will not be able to grow up and watch. It sucks that he played the majority of his career in Seattle because I live on the East Coast, but the dude's a gem. But this upcoming weekend is alumni weekend for the Phillies, where they will induct members to their Wall of Fame. Now, unlike Cooperstown, the Phillies do this every year. So every year they're inducting somebody new. And one of the things I love about Major League Baseball is they won't induct somebody every year. This isn't football where it's like, well, we got to induct 8 members this year. Like, that's ridiculous. Major League Baseball sometimes will induct one, none, or they'll do, the veteran committee. I mean, if no one's worthy of the hall, they won't get in. The Phillies are different. I mean, they got to sell tickets, so yeah, okay. Like, there's enough good players where they're not going to be in the Hall of Fame, but let's acknowledge what they've done for the franchise. And this upcoming weekend, you have 2 people being inducted that are very important to the Phillies franchise. You have Ed Wade, the former general manager of the Phillies, and you have James Calvin Rollins, Jimmy Rollins. And this is where this video really starts, because while Jimmy Rollins is getting inducted into the Phillies Wall of Fame, Jimmy Rollins should one day enjoy his own speech in Cooperstown. And if you want to argue with me, I have the stats to back it up. Before I get into it, though, I do want to talk about Ed Wade, because Ed Wade was my GM growing up. Like, that was the guy that was running the organization when I was coming into my own as a Phillies fan. And what he did for this organization, I think gets forgotten by a lot of fans, and it'll be brought to the surface more this upcoming weekend. But the drafting of the core for a World Series team was Ed Wade. But more importantly than that, not trading away that core. At one point, and I'm sure this will get brought up because there's nothing more that GMs love to talk about than the good move they didn't make. If you notice, that's a really popular thing amongst GMs. They'll always remind you, oh yeah, we had a chance to get this veteran player who was 36, former All-Star, but they wanted us to give up a young pitcher. His name was Roy Halladay, and we said no. Convenient. Billy King loves lying about how he didn't get cold feet with Tracy McGrady, even though he did. GMs love doing that. I have respect for Ed Wade because Ed Wade's the only GM I've ever heard in my life actually admit he took a worse deal, and that was the Brad Lidge deal. He is on record as saying we had 2 offers for Brad Lidge. The one was the deal that we took, which was Jeff Geary, Mike Costanzo, and Taylor Buchholz. I believe that was a trade. No, Michael Bourne, Jeff Geary, and Mike Costanzo. That was the trade. Taylor Buchholz was in the Billy Wagner trade. Or we had this other offer for a former really, really good pitcher but was coming off a bad year. That pitcher was Cliff Lee. And he's like, yeah, I probably should have taken the Cliff Lee deal, considering Mike Costanzo never amounted to much. Michael Bourne's a really, really good player for Houston. But Brad Lidge, goes a perfect season in 2008 and closes out a World Series. So I have respect for Ed Wade. But he had a deal on the table where he wanted to get Barry Zito. And the Oakland A's at the time wanted Chase Utley, Michael Bourne, and Ryan Madsen, I believe. And he said, no, that's too much. And the Phillies were really close to a playoff berth for the first time in more than a decade. And he was like, no, I'm good. There is a trade that does not get talked about enough, which was he actually offered Ryan Howard at the time, who was in AAA, mashing home runs. But he offered Ryan Howard to the Tampa Bay Rays for a young center fielder named Rocco Baldelli. At the time, it would have made sense. The Phillies needed a center fielder. They had this Jim Thome guy. They didn't really need Ryan Howard. And Rocco Baldelli was really good. He's a former 5th overall pick, and he looked like he was going to be a future All-Star. And he had shown flashes and all that. Unfortunately for Rocco Baldelli, his career was derailed by a rare degenerative disease, I believe. And then Ryan Howard went on to win an MVP. That, by the way, is per Jason Stark. Like, that lives rent-free in my mind. So I have a lot of respect for Ed Wade because he held off on trading some of this core that really ended up winning the World Series, even though the Ryan Howard trade he offered and kind of just lucked out. Let's get on to Jimmy Rollins and why I will throw hands for Jimmy Rollins. Why I am convinced that Jimmy Rollins should be in Cooperstown one day. Okay? And I realize that time is running out. I think he's got 6 years left on the ballot. He's not gaining momentum like he probably should for somebody that is Cooperstown bound, like Chase Utley, actually. But fine, whatever. Here's my argument, okay? And I'm so passionate about this, and some people know this, that I keep a list in my wallet. Because I think we have this thing in society where people love arguing about the Hall of Very Good. Oh, he's a Hall of Very Good member. He's not a Hall of Famer. And when you think about it, there's very few players in baseball where you immediately go like, he's a Hall of Famer. And those players are first ballot Hall of Famers. Like Mike Trouts, the Otanis, the Verlanders. Like first ballot Hall of Famers. You forget that the Hall of Fame is also filled up with guys that took 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times on the ballot. And they're Hall of Famers, but it just took a little bit of time to get them there. And I'm not arguing that Jimmy Rollins is the first ballot Hall of Famer, because he's not. I'm arguing that he is a Hall of Famer only if you match him up against other Hall of Famers. That's all. That's my argument right there. Okay? You don't think Jimmy Rollins is a Hall of Famer? Fine. That's your problem. Just match his stats up against other shortstops in the Hall of Fame, and it tells a different story. So I got so sick of defending Jimmy Rollins because I think Phillies fans, they have this thing where it's like, they don't want to be too biased, and this is probably for every fan base. They don't want to be too biased, so it's like, okay, whoa, we don't want to be homers, so they go the other way. And the Jimmy Rollins argument was always one that I thought they went too far the other way. I got sick of arguing with them, so I literally wrote down the reasoning so that anytime I said Jimmy Rollins is a Hall of Famer, and I got, come on, man, really? I would just whip this out and put the argument to rest. So let me read them off. And actually, as I pulled this out of my wallet, because it sits in my wallet, I did notice there is a slight problem. One of the pieces is missing. You can literally see on the back, right? Like it's just, this thing has been folded and pressed in my wallet. And then this part is, I gotta put this in. So you're not gonna get the when you compare him to other Hall of Famers argument. I apologize, okay? But let's start out with Jimmy Rollins, just his stats in general, because at the end of the day, that is the Hall of Fame. Like it or not, baseball is the ultimate number sport. The Hall of Fame, it's a numbers compilation game. He's got it. Okay. 2,275 games played, 1,421 runs scored, 2,455 hits, 511 doubles, 115 triples, 936 RBIs, primarily, you have to remember this, out of the leadoff spot. 470 stolen bases, 231 home runs. Again, guys like 5'11", smashing 231 home runs as a shortstop. 1 MVP, 1 Silver Slugger. He's a member of the 20-20-20-20 club, meaning 20 doubles, triples, home runs, and stolen bases. He is a 4-time Gold Glover, a 3-time All-Star. By the way, this is why I don't really take account into the All-Star thing. The year he won MVP, he was not an All-Star. But he's a 3-time All-Star. He is the only player in Major League Baseball history with a 20-30-40 season. 20 doubles, 30 triples, 40 stolen bases. That obviously being the MVP year in 2007. Now, when you look at the franchise of the Phillies, they've been around for a little bit, 1883, a couple years, right? He ranks first in franchise history in hits, at-bats, and doubles. He ranks second in franchise history in games played and stolen bases. The guy that is first on that list is some dude named Mike Schmidt. And then the third guy is Richie Ashburn. I don't know if you've heard of him. Both guys are in the Hall of Fame. So sandwiched in the games played thing is Jimmy Rollins. Stolen bases, by the way, the total bases is 3,655. He is second on the franchise list for that. The third in that is Ed Delahanty, another one in the Hall of Fame. So he's ahead of Ed Delahanty when you look at total bases. He's second. Mike Schmidt's first. He is second. Ed Delahanty's third. Again, he's sandwiched between two Hall of Famers. He ranks third in franchise history in runs scored with 1,325, and he also ranks third in franchise history in triples with 111. You got to remember, because the Phillies were around for so long, you've got guys who were compiling triples because they just were fast and they were playing, carpenters. But so the fact that he is third in franchise history is actually really, really impressive when you consider, I think Ed Delahanty's probably first. I don't know who's second, actually. That's on me. Okay. When you just look at the next level stats, okay, because that's just the franchise of the Phillies. Look at the next level stats of why Jimmy Rollins is a Hall of Famer. Rollins is just one of 7 shortstops with 2,000 hits, 700 extra base hits. Okay, I can see you're not convinced. All right, 1 of 7. Okay, how about this? Rollins is just one of 5 shortstops with 2,000 hits and 400 stolen bases. 1 of 5. I can tell you're not convinced. Okay, how about this? Only Rollins and some dude named Honus Wagner have 2,000 hits, 700 extra base hits, and 400 stolen bases. I did look this up. Honus Wagner is in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, believe it or not. Old player, but he's in the Hall of Fame. Rollins is the only shortstop ever to win an MVP award in addition to 4 Gold Gloves. Among shortstops with at least 10 years of service time, Rollins ranks second in fielding percentage behind some guy named Omar Vizquel, who was pretty good with a glove. Now, I can tell you right now, my biggest argument for why Jimmy Rollins is in the Hall of Fame, and I can't give it to you just because, again, the paper, I don't know what happened in this part, but I just know this going off the dome. The biggest argument is the fact that Barry Larkin's in the Hall of Fame. And Barry Larkin was in the Hall of Fame, I want to say probably the class of 2012 maybe. And when you look at Barry Larkin's career compared to Jimmy Rollins is better than Barry Larkin. Statistically across the board, he's better than Barry Larkin. He's got as many MVPs. He's got more Gold Gloves. When you factor in what Jimmy Rollins did on both sides of the plate, the defense and the offense, because that is so important. When you factor that in, if Barry Larkin's in the Hall of Fame, Jimmy Rollins is in the Hall of Fame. And if you don't believe me on that, Barry Larkin is quoted as saying that exact statement. If I'm in, then he's got to be in. When you look at during the timeline when Jimmy Rollins played, and you look at the great shortstops, it's Alex Rodriguez, who eventually switched to third base, but still Alex Rodriguez, who take away the steroid stuff, Hall of Famer, Derek Jeter, and then it's Jimmy Rollins. For that stretch of time, Jimmy Rollins was the best shortstop in the National League, period, point blank, for a long, considerable time. With his production, the best shortstop in the National League. Consistently the straw that stirred the drink. But factor in also the leadership. And I don't think this gets talked about enough because in baseball, as I said, it's a sport of numbers game. It's a number compilation game. When you look at his leadership, and this is something that I think will end up hurting him because the stat nerds out there, they haven't created ex-VLORP for leadership. But the fact that this dude comes out after coming 1 game away from making the playoffs for the first time in his career in 2006 and says, yeah, I think we're the team to beat. And of course, the Mets are like, we won the division. I don't know what you're talking. You haven't won since '93. It's been a minute. And he goes, no, I think we're the team to beat. He says it to motivate his teammates so that they believe, no, we're really good. And of course, everybody remembers in 2007. 7 games back, 17 left to play. Who put the team on his back? Jimmy Rollins. Last game of the season when they needed that win. Who starts out the game with his 20th triple? Jimmy Rollins. The fact that he said it and then backed it up with an MVP season, I don't think it's talked. Guess whose phone died as I was recording that? It's me. Yeah. To put a bow on all the Jimmy Rollins talk, though, as I mentioned earlier, the Phillies have been around since 1883. Their first season ticket holders were Civil War vets. Like, let that sink in. So we're talking about a storied franchise. Look, they've only won 2 World Series, but still, that is a franchise that's been around for a long, long time. You cannot tell the history of the Philadelphia Phillies without talking about James Calvin Rollins. You can't do it. He's the greatest shortstop in franchise history, and it's not close. But if you want to make the argument of like, okay, Pat, well, you can't talk about the Philadelphia Phillies history without talking about the greatest first baseman of all time, Ryan Howard. Fine. You're right. And Ryan Howard's not a Hall of Famer. He was on that trajectory until injuries took his career. But, okay, fine. I don't think you can talk about the history of baseball without talking about Jimmy Rollins. Because of what I mentioned earlier. Because of that stretch where Jimmy was the best shortstop in the National League. And I don't think it was particularly close. What he added on the field, off the field, offensively, defensively, he was it. He was the guy. You're not going to give me Troy Tulowitzki. You're not going to give me Jose Reyes. In the National League, it was Jimmy Rollins. Period, point blank. And during that stretch of baseball, and we're talking like, what, 2006. We'll start at 2006. To 2012, Jimmy Rollins was a major, major part of Major League Baseball. So I don't think you can tell the history of the sport without mentioning Jimmy Rollins. And that alone should get him in the Hall of Fame. The fact that he was so important to the sport during that period of time. Again, I think we get lost in the whole like, well, is the Hall of very good? Because in our mind we go, okay, he was really good, but he's not a Hall of Famer. And that distinction, the Hall of Fame distinction, is really only for the first ballot guys. And in Ichiro's case, the second ballot guys, because some writers have a stick up their ass. But when you look at the history of baseball, it's littered with more guys that got in on the third, fourth, fifth, sixth try than the first ballot guys or the second ballot guys. I think Chase Utley will get in before Jimmy Rollins gets in. I think Chase might even get up there on the stage and make a pitch that, you know, his mate, his double play partner, deserves to be in, because he does. Because while Chase Utley did the little things that writers loved, right? He didn't really talk, was a robot out there, kept his head down, hustled. His IQ was off the charts when it came to baseball. The work ethic was absolutely there. And of course, like the advanced metrics that the nerds love. When you look at who the leader of that team was, though, Chase might have led by example on the field at times, sure, no question. But the leader of the team was Jimmy Rollins. And I don't think any Phillies fan or Phillies player, for that matter, will argue that. He was so important to that team. And I really think he should get in the Hall of Fame. I hope that he does. He deserves it. Again, I'm not here to argue that he's first or second ballot. I mean, obviously that time has passed. And I think it would probably come down to that last year. But I think when you look at the history of the game and what he was able to do in that time period, yeah, the advanced metrics aren't there. But just think about the eye test. Think about what he did. Think about the fact that when you look at some of these stats, he's the only guy to ever do it. The 20, 30, 40 season. You know? You saw that one time in your life, and it was when Jimmy Rollins did it. So yeah, there's my pitch. If you want to argue about it, please go find a wall or a cardboard cutout, because they will be better listeners than me. I am dug in on this. I will die on this hill. And if he doesn't get in, I will die on the hill still. And I will be screaming from the rooftops of the Veterans Committee or whatever the hell they're calling it now. The Golden Era, I don't know. But whatever they're calling it now, I'll be screaming for them to right what the writers did wrong. The writers recently have gone more analytical than anything else, because I think as the old guard moves out of baseball and the young guard moves in, the young guard is more of an analytically driven, you know, writer's guild, if you will. And then the old guard is more of the eye test and, you know, that the good with the bad. I mean, they can be a finicky group. Like if you didn't treat them right, oh, well, you're off the, you know, I'm not voting you in. But I think if Jimmy Rollins had come around 10 years earlier, this wouldn't even be a question. their writers would have voted him in. Because you have more analytically driven writers nowadays, they're looking at the advanced metrics and not thinking about all of the encompassing factor of what he meant to not only the franchise, but baseball itself. There you go. Now's the part where I beg you to hit a subscribe button because I need 1,000 of them. I don't have 1,000. I need 1,000 so I can start getting paid. As soon as I hit 1,000, I'll stop begging. I will. But, right now that's important. Hit that little button. I'm not asking you to like. I'm not asking you to comment, share, none of that. You know where those buttons are. You can do it if you want. I just need subscribers. Go Phillies.